how Rough Lee was again besieged. Parson Holden, it will be remembered, left Rough Lee charged by Potts with a message to Sir Ralph Assheton, informing him of his detention and that of Roger Norwell by Mistress Nutter, and imploring him to come to their assistance without delay. Congratulating himself on his escape, but apprehensive of pursuit, the worthy rector, who as a keen huntsman was extremely well mounted, made by the best of his way, and had already passed the gloomy gorge through which Pendle Water sweat, had climbed the hill beyond it, and was crossing the moor, now alone, lying between him and Goldshaw, when he heard a shout behind him, and turning at the sound, beheld Blackadder and another mounted serving man issuing from a thicket and spurring furiously after him. Relying upon the speed of his horse, he disregarded their cries and accelerated his pace, but in spite of this, his pursuers gained upon him rapidly. While debating the question of resistance or surrender, the rector descried Bess Whitaker coming towards him from the opposite direction, a circumstance that greatly rejoiced him, for aware of her strength and courage, he felt sure he could place as much dependence upon her in this emergency as on any man in the country. Bess was riding a stout, rough-looking nag, apparently well able to sustain her weight, and carried the redoubtable horsewhip with her. On the other hand, Holden had been recognised by Bess, came just as he was overtaken and seized by his assailants, one of whom caught hold of his cassock and tore it from his back, while the other, seizing hold of his bridle, endeavoured, in spite of his efforts to the contrary, to turn his horse round. Many oaths, threats, and blows were exchanged during the scuffle, which no doubt would have terminated in the rector's defeat, and his compulsory return to Rough Lee, had it not been for the opportune arrival of Bess, who, swearing as lustily as the serving men and brandishing the horsewhip, dashed into the scene of action, and with a few well applied cuts liberated the divine. Enraged at her interference and smarting from the application of the whip, Blackadder drew Petronel from his girdle and levelled it at her head, but ere he could discharge it, the weapon was stricken from his grasp, and a second blow on the head from the butt end of the whip felled him from his horse. Seeing the fate of his companion, the other serving man fled, leaving Bess mistress of the field. The rector thanked her heartily for the service she had rendered him, and complimented her on her prowess. "I'n not done much to boast on, I levering them to seer-faced rapscallions," said Bess, with becoming modesty. "Simon Blackadder and I had money a tussle together before this, for he's a few tempered fella and canna drink about fighting, but he allus found me more nor his match. Or say us, your reverence, what were the ill-favoured scullions riding after ye for? Ferrets take 'em, they didn't mean to rob you, surely." "Their object was to make me prisoner and carry me back to Rough Lee, Bess," replied Holden. "They wish to prevent my going to Worley, whither I am bound to procure help from Sir Ralph Assheton to liberate Master Roger Norwell and his attorney, who were forcibly detained by Mistress Nutter. You may spare your horse and yourself the journey then, reverend sir," replied Bess, "for you'll find Sir Thomas McCarthy with some 20 or 40 followers, armed with bills, orbers, petronels, and calivers at Goldshaw, and they will go with ye at once, I'm certain. I heard some other chap say as old Sir Thomas is going to take possession of Mistress Robinson's house, Raydale, Wensleydale, but no doubt he's go first with your reverence, especially as he bears Mistress Nutter a grudge. At all events I will ask him," said Holden. "Are he and his followers lodged at your house, Bess?" "Yeah," replied the hostess. "Some on and are at the house, some are in the barn, and some are in the stables. The place is altogether overrun with them. I were so murdered and worried when they came bawling for Ellen and drink that I swore they shouldn't have another drop with my consent, and to be as good as my word I clapped key on cellar I my pocket and leaving our Margaret to answer them, I set out as you see, intending to go as far as the mill and come before Deverly shot Baldwin in his trouble. A most praiseworthy resolution, Bess," said the rector, "but what is to be done with this fellow?" he added, pointing to Blackadder, who though badly hurt was trying to creep towards Petronel, which was lying at a little distance from him on the ground. Perceiving his intention, Bess quickly dismounted, and possessing herself of the weapon, stepped aside, and slipping off one of the bands that tied the horse on the well-shaped leg, grasped the wounded man by the shoulders, and with great expedition tied his hands behind his back. She then lifted him up with as much ease as if he had been an infant, and set him upon his horse, with his face towards the tail. This done, she gave the bridle to the rector, and handing him the petronel at the same time, told him to take care of his prisoner, for she must pursue her journey. And with this, in spite of his renewed entreaties that she would go back with him, she sprang on her horse and rode off. On arriving at Goldshaw with his prisoner, the rector at once proceeded to the hostel, in front of which he found several of the villagers assembled, attracted by the numerous company within doors, whose shouts and laughter could be heard at a considerable distance. Holden's appearance with Blackadder occasioned considerable surprise, and all eagerly gathered around him to learn what had occurred, but without satisfying their curiosity beyond telling them he had been attacked by the prisoner, he left him in their custody and entered the house, where he found all the benches in the principal room occupied by a crew of half-drunken roisterers, with flagons of ale before them. For after Bes's departure with the key, they had broken into the cellar, broaching a cask, held themselves to its contents. Various weapons were scattered about the tables or reared against the walls, and the whole scene looked like a carouse by a band of marauders. Little respect was shown the rector, and he was saluted by many a ribald jest as he pushed his way towards the inner room. Sir Thomas was drinking with a couple of desperadoes, whose long rapiers and tarnished military equipment seemed to announce that they had at some time or other belonged to the army, though their ruffianly looks and braggadocio air and discourse, strongly seasoned with oaths and slang, made it evident that they were now little better than Alsatian bullies. They had in fact been hired by Sir Thomas for their expedition, on which he was bent, as he could find no one in the country upon whom he could so well count as on them. Eyeing the rector fiercely as he intruded into their privacy, they glanced at their leader to ask whether they should turn him out, but receiving no encouragement for such rudeness, they contented themselves with scowling at him from beneath their bent brows, twisting up their shaggy moustaches and trifling with the hilts of their rapiers. Holden opened his business at once, and as soon as Sir Thomas heard it, he sprang upon his feet, and swearing a great oath, declared he would storm roughly and burn it to the ground if Mistress Nutter did not set the two captives free. As to the audacious witch herself, I will carry her off in sight of the devil her master, he cried. How say you, Captain Gauntlet, and you too, Captain Sauce? Is not this an expedition suited to your taste? Ha. The two worthies appealed to responded joyously that it was so, and it was then agreed that Blackadder should be brought in and interrogated, as some important information might be obtained from him. Upon this, your mistress has made, and whether you judge it likely, she will attempt to hold out her house against us. Most assuredly she will, replied Blackadder, and against twice your force. Roughly is as strong as the castle, and as those within it are well armed, vigilant, and of good courage, there is little fear of its capture. If your worship should propose terms to my mistress for the release of her prisoners, she may possibly assent to them, but if you approach her in hostile fashion and demand their liberation, I am well assured she will resist you, and well assured also she will resist you effectually. I shall approach her in no other sort than that of an enemy, rejoined Sir Thomas, for thou art overconfident to name. Unless thy mistress have a legion of devils at her back, and they hold us in check, we will force our way into her dwelling. Fire and fury, dost presume to laugh at me, fellow? Take him hence, and let him be soundly cudgelled for his innocence. Gauntlet. Pardon me, your worship, cried Blackadder. I only smiled at the strange notions you entertain of my mistress. Why dost mean to deny that she is a witch? Demanded Metcalfe. Nay, if you worship to have it so, it is not for me to contradict thee, replied Blackadder. But I ask thee, is she not a servant of Satan? Dost thou not know it? Canst thou not prove it? Cried the knight. Shall we put him into the fortune of the torture to make him confess? Aye, tie his thumbs together till the blood bursts forth, Sir Thomas, said Gauntlet. Or hang him up to yon beam by the heel, suggested Captain Sauce. On no account, interposed Holden. I did not bring him hither to be dealt with in this way. I will not permit it. If torture is to be administered, it must be by the hands of justice, into which I require him to be delivered, and then he can testify against his mistress. He will be made to do it. Torture shall never wring a word from me. whether wrongfully or rightfully applied, said Blackadder dodgily, though I could tell much if I chose. Now give heed to me, Sir Thomas, you'll never take roughly, still less its mistress without my help. What are thy terms, Kinnaird? Explained the knight, pondering upon the offer, and take heed thou triflest not with me, or I will have thee flogged within an inch of thy life, in spite of parson or justice. What are thy terms? I repeat. They are for your worship's ear alone, replied Blackadder. Beware what you do, Sir Thomas, interposed Holden. I hold it my duty to tell you you are compromising justice in listening to base proposals of this man who, while offering to betray his mistress, will assuredly deceive you. You will equally deceive him in feigning to agree to terms which you cannot fulfill. Cannot fulfill, ejaculated the knight, highly offended. I would have you know, sir, that Sir Thomas Metcalfe's word is his bond, and that whatsoever he promises he will fulfill, in spite of the devil, body or me. But for the respect I owe your cloth, I will give you a very different answer, reverend sir. But since you have chosen to thrust yourself unasked into the affair, I take leave to say that I will hear this knave's proposals, and judge for myself of the expediency of acceding to them. I must pray you therefore to withdraw. Nay, if you will not go hence peacefully, you shall perforce take him away, gentlemen. Thus enjoined, the Alsatian captains took each an arm of the rector and forced him out of the room, leaving Sir Thomas alone with the prisoner. Greatly incensed at the treatment he had experienced, Holden instantly quitted the house, hastened to the rectory, which adjoining the church, and having given some messages to his household, rode off to Warley with the intention of acquainting Sir Ralph Asherton with all that had occurred. Sir Thomas Metcalfe remained close-headed with the prisoner for a few minutes, and then coming forth, issued orders that all should get ready to start roughly without delay, whereupon each man emptied his flagon, pocketed the dice he had been cocking, pushed aside a shuffleboard, left the loggers on the clay floor of the barn, and grasping his weapon, halberd or caliver as it might be, prepared to attend his leader. Sir Thomas did not relate even to the Alsatian captains what had passed between him and Blackadder, but it did not appear that he placed entire confidence in the latter, although he caused his hands to be unbound, and allowing him in consideration of his estate to ride for a direct one and saw the head for his person provided horses and those there all the rest of the party for Metcalfe inquiries after the record. The time that he was gone did not concern himself about it before starting the night with all his recklessness and a certain sense of honesty. Called the girl who had been left in charge of the hostel by Beck, and gave her some complete sedition over all the excesses of his men, adding a handsome gratuity to herself. The first part of the journey was accomplished without mischance, and the party bade fair to arrive at the end of it safely. But as they entered the gorge, at the extremity of which the lead was situated, a terrific storm burst upon them, compelling them to seek shelter in the hut which they were going not far distant at the time. The house was completely deserted, but they were well able to shift for themselves, and not always consider the manner of doing so. And as the remains of the funeral feast were not removed from the table, some of the company sat down to them, while others found their way to the cellar. The storm was of long continuance, much longer than was agreeable to Sir Thomas, and he paced the room to and fro impatiently, ever and anon walking to the window or door to see whether it had in any degree abated, and he was constantly doing to this point. Instead of diminishing, it increased in size, and it was now impossible to quit the house in safety. The lightning blazed, the thunder rattled among the overhanging rocks, and the swollen steam pendulum water roared at their feet. Blackadder was left under the care of two Alsatians, so while they had shielded their eyes from the glare of the light, he flew open the window and springing through it made his retreat. Such a storm it was indeed to follow him, even if they had dared to attempt it. In vain Sir Thomas Metcalfe fumed and fretted. In vain he heaped curses upon the bullies for their negligence. In vain he hurled menaces after the fugitive. The former paid little heed to his imprecations, and the latter was beyond his reach. The notion began to gain ground amongst the rest of the troop that the storm was a work of witchcraft, and occasioned general consternation. Even the knight's anger yielded to superstitious fear, and as a terrific explosion shook the rafters overhead and threatened to bring them down upon him, he fell on his knees and essayed with unaccustomed lips to murmur a prayer, but he was interrupted among his followers, striving to dispel their fears and persuade them that the tempest was only the result of natural causes. When the door was suddenly thrown open, giving entrance to vessels for she started on the scene with the hearty assembly and knit her brows, but said nothing until she had Hoddy holding in, and when he alerted Sir Thomas that he seemed to have in taking possession of a house in Horner's absence. The knight excused himself for the intrusion by saying he had been compelled by the storm to take refuge there with his followers, and he readily admitted by Baldwin he was now able to speak for himself. And the miller next explained that he had been to Rugby, and after many perilous adventures into the particulars of which he did not enter, had been brought away by them who had carried him on. That he now felt free and lonely and insecure one, unless she would consent to occupy with him, and the best of being thus appealed to affirm that the only motive that would induce her to consent to such an arrangement was her desire to protect him from his mischievous neighbours. While they were thus discussing it appeared had one of them arrived well and nigh exhausted and both with weapons of some regression, for by this time Sir Thomas sufficiently geared off around others to take their departure, and the miller and Bess were being have persuaded the knight from the enterprise was not to be turned aside, between him and the settlers of the rain had ceased. It was soon very dark. The cover of the room, however, before they could approach the house was observed, and obtained an entrance for in this expectation, they pursued their way in silence and soon stood before the gates. These were fastened, but as no one appeared to be on the watch, Sir Thomas, in a low hall, ordered some of his men to scale the wall, with the intention of following himself, but scarcely had a head risen to the level of the river than the flash of an arquebuse was seen, and the man drew backwards, luckily just in time to avoid bullets that stood over him. An alarm was then instantly given. Voices were heard in the garden, mingled with the furious barking of hounds. The bell was ringing from the part of the house, and lights appeared at the windows. Meanwhile, some of the men, less alarmed than their comrade, contrived to scramble over the wall, and soon engaged hand-to-hand with those on the opposite side. But not alone had they to contend with adversaries lying at themselves. The Saxons, which had done so much execution during the first attack on the house by Roger Norwell, raged amongst them like so many lions, rending their limbs and seizing their blows to free themselves from these formidable antagonists was their first business, and by dint of push from pike, blade, sword, and bow and caliber, they succeeded in slaughtering two of them and driving the others badly wounded and savagely howling away. In doing this, however, they themselves had sustained considerable injury. Three of their numbers were lying on the ground in poor condition, with their broken heads or shattered limbs during the combat. Thus, so far as the siege had gone, success seemed to declare itself rather for the defenders and the assailants, when a new impulse was given to the latter by bursting open of the gates and the sudden influx of Sir Thomas Metcalfe and the rest of his troop. The knight was closely followed by the Alsatian captains, who, with tremendous swords in their mouths and slashing blades in their hands, declared they would make mincemeat of any one of us in their progress. Sir Thomas was equally truculent in expression and ferocious in tone, and as the whole party laid about them right and left, they speedily into the defenders of the garden and drove them towards the house. Flushed by their success, the besiegers shouted loudly, and Sir Thomas roared out that here are many minutes Norwell and Potts should be set free, and Alice Nutter captured. But before he could reach the main door, Nicholas Assheton, well armed and attended by some dozen men, presented himself at it. These were instantly joined by the retreating party, and the whole offered a formidable array of opponents, quite sufficient to check the progress of the besiegers. 2 or 3 of the men near Nicholas carried torches, and their light revealed the numbers on both sides. "What, is it you, Sir Thomas Metcalfe?" cried the squire. "Do you commit such outrages as this? Do you break into habitations like a robber, rifle them and murder their inmates? Explain yourself, sir, or I will treat you as I would a common plunderer, shoot you through the head, or hang you to the first tree if I take you." "Zounds and fury," rejoined Metcalfe, "do you dare to liken me to a common murderer? Take care you do not experience the same fate as that with which you threatened me. This it was all that a hand of common handle of Lancaster shall serve your turn. I will give her to arrest and gloriously, and to these 2 gentlemen who are lawfully taken prisoners by me, and do not intervene with Master Roger Norwell and Master Parks, I will force my way into the house, and all injury done to those who are holding will rest on your head. The two gentlemen you have named are perfectly safe and contented in their quarters by the honest. And as
System
you foul
100.
and false assertions for now against Mr. Miller, I cast them back in your teeth. Your purpose in coming hither is to dress some private round. How is it you have such a round? How is it I behold you that always rather by your side? Men who are stood in the pillar and undergone the ignominious punishment for their offences. You cannot answer, and their awesome breasts fall for nothing. I now tell you, Sir Thomas, if you do not instantly withdraw your men and quit these premises, serious consequences will ensure to you, and then I will hear no more, cried Sir Thomas, infuriated to the last degree. Follow me into the house, and spare none who oppose you. You are not in yet, cried Nicholas, as he saw the broad hides bristled around him, holding the night at bay, while the hook was fixed in the double of each of the Alsatian captains, and they were put forward and dragged into the house. This done, Nicholas and his men quickly retreated, and the door was closed and barred upon the enraged and discomfited knight.